Hello everyone, this is Sara, Covenant of Hekate, Sanctuary of Hekate Potter Theron, and with me there is also Gio, one of our Keybearer. And today we're going to have an introduction to Hekate Soteira, so the role of Hekate in the Chaldean oracles. It's going to be more like theory. Doing everything in one class is just impossible, so if you like the class, we're going to have another one later on in the year, more hands-on. But today we start really with the basic. And we're going to scratch just the surface because it may be quite complicated also for me. So if you have any question, again, you can put them in the chat, and we're going to have a Q&A time at the end of the presentation, at the end of the place. So first slide is obviously the meaning of Soteira, because Hekate Soteira is a very peculiar epithet of Hekate, and it means the savior, from the Greek word soter, that is actually quite famous, and you maybe have heard of it also if you have a Christian background, because it's the same epithet we have with Jesus. Jesus Soter is the savior. So a lot of people ask me, are we talking about the soul? So is that kind of saving the soul? And is a very famous question that I raise quite often. And the answer is more or less. We're going to see. No spoiler right now, but basically that is where we are going right now. So I know that this is usually done at the end of the presentation. I'm going to do it immediately. So the books I use for that, because I think it's very important to have a good idea of the books I used to learn more about the Chaldean oracles, and it's very important to have them in mind. So the first one obviously is Hekate Soteira, this one that is by Sara Johnston. Then I really recommend you to read The Goddess Hekate by Stephen Ronan, because there is a very good scheme over there that explain you the Chaldean system. That is the most difficult part, in my opinion, to understand. Then I had also the Chaldean oracles and Theurgy by Lewy, and then one translation of the Chaldean oracles. I have this one, which is actually in Italian, but there are plenty of the translation in English. What I really suggest to you to do, if you are really interested in working with the Chaldean oracles, is to find a good recent translation that is using a modern English, because some of the translation, they are very poetic, they are very beautiful, they work great for rituals, but if you need to understand them, they are not very easy. And the first point, talking about some complex text like the Chaldean oracles, is really to understand what they are trying to tell you. We're going to discuss a bit about that maybe later on. But basically, let's dig in the topic. So Chaldean oracles, what are they? The Chaldean oracles are oracles written in the 2nd century CE, so AD basically, in the period of Marcus Aurelius, by Julian the Theurgist, who was the son of Julian the Chaldean. Problem is that we do not know if the two Julians really existed. Maybe they are just mythical figures. It's the first time that we have the name Theurgist written down, recorded. So they were probably very special people, and they were not Chaldean, probably. Chaldean is more about the Middle East, but in the Chaldean oracles, the tradition we have, it's more really like Middle Platonism and Neoplatonism. So we are in an Hellenic philosophy and tradition. It's a Greek text, obviously, written in hexameters. It means the language used by Homer. So it's a poem. It's not a book about philosophy. It's really a poetry book. And this is why the language is very obscured. It's an oracle, so that is also not easy to understand. Plus, it's also written in like a poem. So it's very difficult to understand. The context also is not clear, because we are in a mystery cult, no doubt, because even inside the Chaldean oracles, we have a verse telling people you need to keep the silence. So it's just that you initiate, you cannot tell what this mystery is about. So they are hiding some information. Plus, we are in a mystical experience of divine possession. Basically, we know that the Julian who wrote this was either inspired directly in a very strong way by the divinity, Either he was really possessed by the divinity and someone else was actually writing down. The oracles, they are really putting ourselves in front of the deity, usually Hekate or Iles or Apollo, and they are speaking in first person. So you can guess how difficult it is to understand. It's a poem translating the language of the gods. And what is even more difficult is that it's not a complete text. So we have usually the Chaldean oracles, like a little book like this. It's not complete. We have just fragments. And these fragments, they didn't come in one book. They actually were quoted in different texts by different authors and writers who lived a century, at least a century after. So we have an ancient book that was rediscovered, because probably it was already famous, by these other writers who quoted just few selected parts of the book because they had their own agenda. What I mean is simple. Obviously, a philosopher, he was writing his own book with his own idea, and he was quoting what was important for him. So he was not giving you the interpretation of the Chaldean oracles, the original one. He was giving you its own point of view. And it happened also with the Christian authors who quoted them. So we are also in another different religion. So these are the difficulties to an already difficult text. So talking about the content, obviously we have information about theology, cosmology, this idea of the salvation of the soul we're going to talk about. And again, in here we have a mix of different kind of tradition. We can find Middle Platonism, Neoplatonism, Hellenistic mysticism, and what Dr. Sledge call the Platonic underground, meaning really Gnosticism, Hermeticism, Jewish and early Christian mysticism, all of them, they are somehow related with the Chaldean oracles, which is extremely, extremely difficult, to have the full picture. Why Hekate? Because the point is how Hekate ended up in the Chaldean oracles. So let me try to see if I can get, there is someone trying to connect. Can you do that, Joe? Can you see that? Because now my screen is basically blocked and I cannot.
What would you like to do?
No, it's done. There is someone trying to connect. Okay, done. Sorry. Sorry, guys.
I got it. It's Jack. He's going in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So Hekate, why Hekate? Because in the fragments we have, and they are 266, we have 5 times the name of Hekate, which is a lot. And the scholars in general recognize at least 66 fragments talking about Hekate or the soul or the both of them. Because the point is that Hekate in the Chaldean oracle, she is identified as the cosmic word soul, basically one of the most important entities in that cosmology, which is something really incredible. Talking about, again, the history of the salvation and the Hekate's role as the cosmic soul, what is interesting to know in the Chaldean oracles is that the oracles are giving you a lot of information about how you can get in touch with these higher entities, like Hekate, for example, how you can talk to her, how you can get in touch with the cosmic word soul, doing what? Contemplation and philosophy, because philosophy back then was intended also as a way of life. It was not just asking stupid questions about crazy things. It was really also about ethic and moral virtues and values. So it was giving you how to act correctly, talking a lot about the virtues like justice and courage and wisdom and everything else. And if you want to talk about, modern theurgy, philosophy is still considered like a sort of purification of the mind. So it was an intellectual path, like an intellectual speculation. Then you have, obviously, the religion, because religion is about illumination. So in philosophy, you try to get to the point with your mind, thinking. In religion, you have, the gods talking to you, so you lead your faith. And then you have the theurgy, that is the divine work. Basically, with theurgy, the idea is to connect philosophy on one side and religion on the other side. And doing that, you can get really to the elevation of the soul, because the idea of all of these is to create a sort of vertical magic, allowing you or us and me, to detach from the material world and travel up to the imperial and ethereal realm. And to explain that to you, let's talking about the theology and cosmology of the Chaldean oracles. This is the most difficult part to understand, and it's not that connected to Hekate, but it's necessary, because if you don't understand this part, it's very difficult to understand how the oracles work. And basically, talking about the theology of the oracles, so Middle Platonism and Neoplatonism, we have this idea that there is, above everything, the one, this sort of ineffable first father that is the principle of everything. This first father, we call that like this, but you can consider him that it's not really even a man. It's the first principle is up there, and is absolutely pure and perfect. Is outside all beings, but it's from here that all beings emerge. So it's like it's there, eternal, perfect. It doesn't exist in real life, like in the material world, and yet it's everywhere. And that is so difficult to grasp for our mind, that is completely transcendent, is completely separated from our reality. And in there, you have the nous, that is usually translated like intellect, but it's more like a sort of divine, intuitive theory intellect. It's more like an intuition, if you want. And the ideas. And the ideas, they are the blueprint, like the archetype of all reality. So basically up there, in this place where we cannot go, we have this sort of everything, the one. And in there we have the blueprint of everything that we have on earth. And then we have on the opposite side the material world, where we have the demiurge, that is a sort of second father that is creating everything. And this is transcendental. I know it's very confusing, transcendent and transcendental, but basically transcendental is something that you can actually grasp. It's a word that we can understand because it's material, we can see it, and it's less pure than the one that is up there and we cannot get. So we have two of them. And how can these two different entities speak to each other? How we have this communication if they are completely different? Well, in between, we have a feminine dynamic power, that is Hekate, that is working as a membrane. She really is in between, like a liminal entity, and she is sharing the same characteristic of the first father. So she's up there, hypercosmic, and she has also the same characteristic of the second father. So she is also in the material world, and sharing the two nature, she can connect the two of them. So you can guess that without Hekate in this system, our reality cannot exist. So it's a very difficult concept, but it's the only way we can really understand why she's so important. And obviously, again, since we have three different figures, we have three, at least, different realms. So the imperial realm is where the first father is the word of the idea, is the word of the perfection, is the purest word, where we should try to go back, because everything that is in there is pure, perfect, and absolutely true. Then we have the ethereal realm. That is where we have the stellar region, basically. We have also the planets. Planets, in this system, they are considered like the gods themselves. They are not just symbols. You have all the sphere of the planet. I don't know if you can see the detail of the image I put in there. That is a bit of the Neoplatonic simplified cosmology. We can talk about that later on, but you can see that we have different spheres, basically. Above everything, there is the imperial realm. In between, we have the spheres of all the planets, like Saturn, and then the sun, and finally the moon. And it's in there that we have Hekate, so just Hekate, like an astral world, where we have also the intermediate creature and also the gods. And then finally we have the sublunar realm, that is the material world, that is Earth, and it's where we live. I try to simplify this. These are other images that give you the idea of all the sphere. But basically, this is very important to understand, because the creation of everything, again, started with the idea, this blueprint. They are created by the Father up there in the ethereal world. Then they are casted into Hekate. It's beautiful to read in the Chaldean oracles because it looks like the ideas they are imprinted in Hekate womb, like really a sort of generation. And it's Hekate that sent them back, or better, down, sent them down to the second father, so in the material world, and they are finally casted into matter. And you can see that there is this sort of, line going down. So we have three different realms. Here you can see I put also the scheme you can find on the Stephen Ronan book about the Chaldean universe. That is very interesting. You can see also in there that it's actually much more complex because I mentioned you just to three words. So the ethereal and the material, but actually going on in time, Neoplatonists splitted the different realms in other different realms. So we have actually three ethereal world, three material world. You can see that everything works in triads because triads, the number was very important. And you can see that it was used, especially by Iamblichus, as a way to organize everything. But we can keep it simple. And again, we have the Empyrean world, the ethereal world, and the material or sensible world. The word that sometimes Sarah Johnston name the Ilic word. And what is amazing to understand is that the only entity that lived in the three of this world, the only one is Hekate. Because we have three phases in the Chaldean oracle of Hekate. We have the hypercosmic Hekate, the one living with the Father in the Empyrean world. We have the etheric Hekate, that is the one giving us the soul, because she is the soul of the cosmos. We're going to talk about that in 5 seconds. But basically, she's also ensouling everything else and sending down to earth our soul as well. And that is also the Hekate that is the ruler or the mother of all the entities, all the spirits that live in between the different worlds. And then we have the material world, where we have physis. Physis is nature, and nature is the material world, the material phase, of Hekate. And it's interesting to notice in this point, please note that this is my own interpretation, but I think it makes a lot of sense because, well, Hekate has three faces, but in the Chaldean oracles, we have sometimes the impression that she has just two of them. She is called two-faced goddess because, well, she has a face, a face looking up to one realm, and at the same time, she has another one looking back to the second realm. And physis in the Chaldean oracles, it's said that she's hanging from Hekate's back because basically, well, like Janus, you have one face looking up at the ethereal world and the other one looking down. In general, in Neoplatonism, the material world is really poorly treated. It was considered some sort of doom area. We are not supposed to spend time. We should actually avoid. We should leave it behind. We can feel that there is something like that in the Chaldean oracle, but it's not that clear. So there is not a complete, damnation of the material world. It's not that clear, at least for me. So the cosmic soul, why Hekate is the cosmic soul. Before talking why Hekate is the cosmic soul, let's try to understand this cosmic soul. What is the role of the cosmic soul in this system? Again, we need to go back a bit to Plato in the Timaeus, one of the dialogue. Basically, Plato tells us that the cosmos is created by the Father as a living being, and though with soul and the nous, so it is intuitive intellect. And the cosmic soul is placed at the center of this universe. So again, it's the center of it, and it radiates outward, constituting, ensouling, and living all the cosmos. So not just the first one, but everything. The soul, again, is a mixture of different substances, meaning it's able to unify different principles and to put in contact the different world. It's a divine and eternal source of rational life, Basically, it's endowed with reason. We can guess, reading all the philosophers, that if you have a soul, you can have a nous, so this sort of intellect. We have that too. It's not as pure as the one, but we do have that if we have a soul. And actually, we can say easily that the soul is the one dividing the living and the dead. So basically, the soul is really what is giving life and rationality and nous to everything. So basically, it's also the base of the harmonic development of all the cosmos. This is why it's so important. And also, the soul is also able to distinguish the thing, to organize these different forms. So basically, you have this idea, this perfect form, this archetype, and the soul is able to take it and translate it in the right way, giving us the right knowledge, even in the material world. So you can see that there is this sort of continuity. And this is what was important, really, in Middle Platonism. Because in Middle Platonism, so when the Chaldean oracles were written, because Plato lived something like 600 years before, but basically, in Middle Platonism, this idea of the soul as a principle of continuity, that was very important. She was just the connector. And in Neoplatonism, so there are the writers who quoted the Chaldean oracles, she really became the creator of the sensible world. So basically, it's the cosmic soul that is sending down the idea, casting them onto the formless matter of the sensible world. So you can see how important actually she is. And why? Why the ancient writers, philosophers, theurgists, they identified Hekate as the cosmic soul. Because, well, she is liminality. If you need to think about a goddess that is able to connect to places, you need to pick up a goddess that is liminality itself. I think that Hekate, being a Titan goddess, she's really representing liminality in space, in time, everywhere. She's the one able to give us the passage. She was obviously the goddess of the threshold, like Enodia, but she is also the one that we can relate since Hesiod to different places, to different nature, like earth, sea, and sky, obviously. You can see that only a goddess that is able to share all the characteristics also with the elements. Fire is not included because you're going to see in the Chaldean oracles, Hekate is fire. So there is no need to add something for the fire. She's already that. You can see that only a deity that is able to do that is also the one able to communicate with all the realms. And then obviously we have all the other characteristic and the epithet of Hekate, like Hekate and the ability of Hekate to guide the soul, like she did with Persephone, through liminal space to different realms also. And also in later literature, we know that Hekate was considered also the guide for the dead and the soul. So you can see that all these information already, confirmed when the Chaldean oracles were written, and also in the 3rd and 4th century AD, when the Neoplatonists were talking about the oracles, they were already acquired. We have an image of Hekate that was already very complex, with plenty of different faces, and that is very important. And then talking about the liminality in time, well, the Deipnon is a non-time in the month, because the lunar month start and beginning with the waning and the waxing of the moon. And well, if you base on the moon, the Deipnon is when the moon is not there. So it's like you are hanging in between, you are really in the liminal space, also in the time. And then obviously Hekate, she was not a goddess of the moon at the beginning, but again, when the oracles they were written, she was already conflated with Artemis and Diana. And the moon was very important, because the moon, starting with Middle Platonism, the moon became the place of transition between the sensible world, so our world, the sublunar world, that means the world under the moon, and the intelligible world. So you can see that Hekate is also associated with the moon. She is the moon, and that is the limit, really the border between our realm and the higher realms above us. So more than this, it's difficult to think. Plus, we have the geography of the moon, because Plutarch, for example, put on the moon the Gulf of Hekate, and that was the place where the souls, like disembodied souls, so dead, but also higher entities working as mediator between the higher gods and our sensible world, they were living there. And in the moon, we had two gates, one looking up at the Elysian plain, so for the souls who behaved, or better, in this case, not behave, but for the people who got a higher knowledge, so the people who were able to climb up this ladder and to discover the true reality, so to, climb up and move forward, and the other gate facing earth. So basically, for the soul ready to reincarnate again. We are under the impression that even in the Chaldean oracles, the main goal was to exit from the reincarnation cycle. It's not that clear, but we can really believe that. Then in the moon, we had also the place for the daimones, for all the spirit. I call them daimones. Some writers translate them with demons. I'm not really a fan of demons, because in today's world, they have a very bad, fame. We always attach to them other meanings. There's nothing to do with the demons you can find in Christianity or in the grimoire. Well, talking about the grimoire, I'm not that sure, but basically we call them daimones. So we use the Greek word, it's much better. And they are all these messenger, these, intermediate creature. And according always to Plutarch, and starting probably with Hesiod, they were living and hanging out around the moon or on the moon. It's a concept that in that moment, when the Chaldean oracles were written, was absolutely accepted. To give you an idea, for example, Julian, not the theurgist, the other one, he actually said that the Caesars, so the emperors, when they died, they were banqueting on the moon. So meaning, their soul, they were actually up there. So it was something very, very common. And then from late classical period onward, Hekate becomes also the mistress of the gods and similar entities that are not men, they are not spirit, they are not gods, they are not alive, they are not dead. So the disembodied soul, it's very difficult to understand what they were. According to the period, we have different interpretation. In any case, they were often placed on the moon. And then another characteristic of Hekate that link her to the role of the soul is the role of the Keybearer, the clay dukos. In the Hellenistic period, the keys are a symbol of Hekate. We can think about Stratonicea, for example, with the procession and the key. We can think about Plutarch that associate the key also to the Moirae, or the Fates, who govern also the passage of the soul. So you can see that that symbol of Hekate really link her to the idea of the soul passing from one realm to the other. Then we have the Platonic concept of celestial gatekeeper. Please disregard the note about the number, the tetractys, and so all of that. It's a very complex topic, so if you have a question about that, we're gonna talk about them later on. And then we have especially this epithet, Amphiprosopos, that is the two-faced goddess. The point about that epithet that is not accepted by everyone is that we have just that epithet once in the Chaldean oracles in a verse that is made by that epithet. So there are writers that are telling you it's not maybe Hekate. In my opinion, that is Hekate. It's the only entity in the system that can have actually two-faced. Again, one looking up and the other one looking in the other direction. And talking about the oracles themselves, let me try to give you some fragments from the oracles. I try to find the same number of the fragment that we have in Hekate Soteira. So if you have the book, you can easily find them. Unfortunately, several different writers used also different number. So they changed the order of the fragments. So sometimes may be quite complex to understand. But again, I'm using the same number you can find on Hekate Soteira book. So talking about Hekate as the cosmic soul, we have very important fragments, like the fragments 32, 34, and 35, that are about Hekate really as a womb. So for example, fragment 32 is the workwoman. She is bestower of life-bearing fire, and filling the life-giving womb of Hekate, she spills on the maintainers the force of vital and powerful fire. So you can see that she's really the womb that is actually spilling this fire down. Then we have, for example, the conflation of Hekate with Rhea, so the mother goddess like High Bali. And in this fragment, the 56, you can read, Rhea truly is the fount and stream of the blessed noetic substances, for she is the first of all in power, and having received into her marvelous womb, she pours forth a whirling generation upon all. So again, you can have this idea of the womb and the generation power of the goddess. Then we have an amazing fragment where we have Hekate speaking to us directly. That is the fragment 38, where we have, these are the thought of the Father, after which is my enwrapping fire. So you can see that she is a fiery entity, enwrapping this thought of the fire. There are probably the ideas, the form, this blueprint of reality, and then she's sending them down to us, basically. And then it's the soul, and she sent down or generate all the other soul. It's interesting to notice that from the left side of Hekate, from the left hip, we have the source of the virtues, while on the right-hand side of Hekate, on the right hip, we have the source of the soul. And that is really, really a beautiful image. Let me see. It's fragment let me check, fragment 96, for example. Its soul, being a brilliant fire by the power of the Father, remains immortal and is the mistress of life and holds the plenitude of the full womb of the cosmos. So again, you can see this idea of the soul of the cosmos. And in fragment 52, you have in the left flank of Hekate reside the source of the virtue, which is completely remains within, not sending forth its virginity. And you have plenty of beautiful description. And talking about, again, the souls, we have fragment 51, for all around the hollows of the cartilage of Hecate's right flank, the abundant liquid of the primal soul gushes unceasingly, completely ensouling the light, the fire, the ether, and the cosmoi. So you can see that Hekate really is the one ensouling everything. She is the cosmic soul. So basically, again, you have this idea of this incredible goddess that is standing everywhere in all the three realms, and thanks to her, you have the creation of the soul, but also everything else. And what is interesting to notice in that moment is also that in the 2nd century, when the Chaldean oracles were written, we have an increasing interest by other religion, soteriological philosophy, always talking about, again, the salvation of the soul, and the increasing interest on the mediating deities. So basically all the divinities that are able to mediate between us at these irreachable, perfect, imperial realms, they become more and more important. And Hekate obviously is the most important one. So to sum it up a bit and to speed up in the topic, basically the message of the oracles is that our soul is from Hekate. The individual souls are all generated from the remnants of the cosmic soul, using less pure material, basically, and mortal part. So we are, even us, we are a spark of the divine, mixed with matter, so we are not as pure as divine creature, obviously. We are partly immortal and partly mortal because our soul is from Hekate, so we are also immortal. We descended from the soul through the different spheres, and it's very interesting to read Xenocrates because he said us that when we descended, going through the different spheres, in that moment we acquired some sort of characteristic of the different sphere we went through. This is also the reason why we can communicate back to the upper realms. That is very, very interesting. And well, we ended up in Earth, in the material world, and we need to figure out how to go back up. This is the duty of the oracles. Try to give us the direction, how we can bypass reality, like the matter reality, the material world, and climb up the ladder again. And to do that, we have to talk about some sort of theurgic operation. Because in the Chaldean oracles, we have this idea of the theurgy again, this magic that is not an horizontal magic. With horizontal magic, usually we intend the magic that you use to get your very material wishes fulfilled. Like, the PGM, you can read a lot of spells about how you can win horse race, how you can get the love of the most beautiful woman in town. That is, material magic. You can use also the same kind of magic in a spiritual way, so you operate on yourself to go up. So that is the more vertical idea. To create what? The sustasis, so the union with the divine. So we can get, reading the oracles, that we have, the telestica, that is, how you create animated statue and soul statue. Then we have the divine possession, that is also already a bit more advanced, because you need two people, actually. In the Chaldean oracles, you always have someone that is a kletor, so is invoking the deity, and someone else who is acting as a vessel for the deity. It's never one unique man. You really need different people working together, or a divine epiphany, like you have the God in front of you. That is really the most difficult task to do. And we're going to see that, because we have Hekate in the Chaldean oracle standing in front of us, telling us what we should do to have the divine epiphany. And how you can do all of that? In different way. Meditation, probably. Visualization. We can guess at some idea in our oracles that are really going into that direction. We have incantation and spells and use of the symbola. What are the symbolas? I'm going to tell you in like 5 seconds. Because the point of the Chaldean oracles, obviously, I did all this sort of introduction to the cosmology, to the theology. Otherwise, it's very difficult to understand how they work and what is the base. But the oracles, they are not the Bible. The duty of the oracle was not to teach you, the theology. You were supposed to know that in advance. They are providing you a sort of very cryptic, poetic, oracular guide, and provide you information what you should do. So, for example, we have in fragment 131 that you need to sing a paean, so a sort of hymn, that you need to keep silent. So in 132, you really have keep silent, mist, I'm quoting. So you are initiate, you are not supposed to talk about what we are doing here to everyone else. The need to be purified, so the importance of the purification. And we have also interesting information about the direction. So basically what I mean with direction in the Chaldean oracles, it's pretty clear that we are not supposed to look to lower demons, so lower daimones related to the earth. We are not going to look down. We need to look to the higher sphere. To give you an example, let me read to you, for example, fragments 135. This is the quote: "It is essential that you do not regard these dogs," dogs is a sort of name for probably very bad daimones, the lower one, "before you are initiated in your body. For being earthly, difficult dogs, they are shameless and charming souls. They constantly lead them away from initiation." So the oracles are really telling you, you need to get in touch with a higher possible creature, possibly the gods, so the planet again, because they are the purest among them. And the final God, again, is to go really all the way up, to have this sort of anagoge that is really a glimpse of these one of this first father. That is the point. So we have also a lot of information about avoiding evil daimones. So the initiation is really required. And then we have also some sort of hint that sometimes the theurgists, they are acting in a coercive way towards the gods. It is difficult to understand to what extent the gods are happy to be dragged down by the theurgist somehow. Somehow we can see that the gods really feel compelled. They are not here willingly. It's thanks to the incantation, to the practice of the theurgy, that we have the god in front of us. That is quite also interesting. If you're interested in a class number 2, we're going to dig also in that topic. But basically talking about how we can use in a practical way the oracles, it's a bit difficult to grasp the interaction that we have between the ritual and the spiritual aspect, because you can see that we have some information about the need to work on ourselves, so in a spiritual way, so meditation and prayers and hymns, they are absolutely important in the oracles. On the opposite side, we have also the practice of magic, so ritual aspect, action that must be performed, incantation that must be pronounced. What is interesting to notice is that in the Chaldean oracles, like in the PGM, we have very clear information about the onomata barbara, that are the strange foreign word that are never translated. And we cannot even translate even today. They don't have any meaning. They are usually a series of vowels or strange name. And even in the Chaldean oracles, we have the same information we have in the PGM. So you are pronouncing them like they are. We have this idea of the vowels that need to be chanted. So obviously we have the ritual, but we have also the practice. It's not just a mental, intellectual path, is also a magical one. Both of them, magic and spiritual work, they are necessary to perform the theurgy. And how we can perform magic? Thanks to the symbola. And we start with the symbola. So basically, again, the idea of the theurgies was to go up, so to unite with the divine. And to achieve that, they have to use different technique. And all these techniques, they are based on the sympathy between the symbola, that is basically the symbol of the deities, and the deities itself. What I mean is simple. The symbola really is a material emblem, like the symbol of a celestial power. And why we have them around? Because the first father, thanks to Hekate, sent them down in the material world. So we can use them. If we can recognize them, if we know them, if we learn to understand how they work, we can use this symbol in the material world. They may be herbs, they may be metal. Sometimes people believe that they may be also crystals. If you know how to use them, they work as symbol. So acting on the symbol, you are acting on the celestial being that is related to the symbol, basically. It's based on sympathy, like magic. And one of the most important symbola used is the strophalos, or the inks. The strophalos is the spinning top used to compel and to invoke the different spirit. I actually use also the strophalos, like the one you can see in the upper right-hand side part of the screen. That is not a strophalos like the spinning top. That is a symbol that is usually today associated with the strophalos. That is an ancient symbol, but it was not associated with Hekate in ancient time. The strophalos we mentioned and we used working with the Chaldean oracles is actually the spinning top you can see in the ancient vases, or you can see also the small little statue of Cupid in the center, made in gold. You can see that he's holding that sort of round little things with two strings. Unfortunately, I don't have mine with me right now, but it's a very simple tool you can use. And the movement and the sound, a sort of whirring sound, is actually replicating the movement of the sky, of the sphere. And that is the point. And these inks, these strophalos, was widely used in magical practice. So we can see it almost in the PGM, but we have plenty of spells, especially love or rain spell in ancient magic and invocation. And it's mentioned also related to the Babylonian magic by ancient writers like Philostratus. It's never clear what it was in ancient time. We can guess it was this sort of spinning top. Sometimes in later period, it was also connected with the rhombus that was actually the bull roarer. I don't have it here either. I'm sorry. Next time I will have everything. But basically, if you Google it down, the bull roarer is like a sort of ancient musical instrument that is usually made of wood attached to a little cord, and you swing it around and it produces strange whirling sound also. Again, you can see the movement and the whirling sound. And apparently, in the Chaldean oracles, we can see that the traditional magic and the Platonic philosophy, they tend to merge together, giving you this idea of a practical magic that is also philosophical. And what is interesting to know about the inks, so this sort of strophalos, is that we are under the impression that the inks is also the name used for some of the entities that work as connectors between the Father and the material world. So you can see that the inks has the same name of the spirit. So it's performing basically the same job. Let's say that the point is that we have all these symbols, all these magical tools, thanks to Hekate, because it's her that is giving us the option, the possibilities to use them, because she reigns over the intermediaries, including obviously the messengers, so these daimones, the inks, and she's also the one that grants us the symbol, telling us that, well, they can work because she's the one who sent them down. So they are absolutely correct. And the most difficult achievement is really the divine epiphany. I'm just reading from chapter 8 of the book Hekate Soteira right now, because I want to give you the idea of how the epiphany happened in the Chaldean oracle, because Hekate describes in the first person how the apparition takes place, basically how the epiphany happened. And you're going to see that is preceded by signs that attest that the divinity is really there. So it's an authentic epiphany. It's not another spirit, another entity appearing in front of you. It's really a real epiphany, because nature reacts. Basically, Hekate epiphany is usually associated with earthquakes. There are some natural disruption, and we can find it also in other literature, because obviously when a god, a deity, is crossing the border, changing the realms, nature is also disrupted. We have something that is not natural, something that is happening, that is not supposed to happen, and it's happening because the Theurgy was able to make it happen, basically, even if the divinity is always involved. It's not happening because, well, we want to see the deities. It may happen also, but usually the movement, at least in the Chaldean oracles, is started by the deities. Anyway, we are reading the fragments 146, 47, and 48. So, I'm just reading. Having spoken these things, you will behold the fire leaping skittishly, like a child over the airy wave, or the fire without form from which a voice emerges, or a rich light whirring around the field in a spiral. But it is also possible that you will see a horse flashing more brightly than light, or a child mounted on the swift back of a horse, a fiery child, or a child covered with gold, or yet again a naked child, or even a child shooting arrows standing upon a horseback. If you say this to me few times, you will observe all things growing dark, or you can see all things in a lion form. For the curved bulb of the heavens disappears, and the stars do not shine, the light of the moon is hidden, and the earth does not stand steady. All things are revealed in lightning. But when you see the sacred fire without form, shining skittishly throughout the depth of the cosmos, Listen to the voice of fire. This is really giving me goosebumps because you really have the presence of Hekate in front of you. And she's the one telling you what you will need to pay attention to. Because, well, you see all these flashing images. Again, like boy on the horse, this fiery horse. And notice how the fire is omnipresent. Because when I mentioned you that the nous, this sort of intellect, is a fiery intellect. Because every time you have something that is related to the higher spheres, to the higher realms, belonging to the noetic world. This is always fiery or luminous. And in here, you really have all these flash-like images, one after the other. And Hekate is telling you, you need to wait, because these fiery images, they are probably mediator, but you would need to wait for what? For the formless fire. It's interesting to read Iamblichus talking about this, because Iamblichus is the one who studied all these different creatures, different entities in between, creating a huge hierarchies of, material, spirit, and then he called them the angels, then we have the archangels, and going up to the scale we have the gods. So how can you recognize who you are talking to if you have so many entities? Well, Hekate is telling you, you need to wait for the figures, for the forms that actually don't have forms. Because everything that is pure and related to the unity, to this one, is formless, because it's perfect. You don't need to have a form. Then the perfect form, like the solid or the gods, they are always perfect. So they don't shapeshift. They are just perfect and beautiful as they are. So they are luminous. Going down in the hierarchy, you have entities. They are shapeshifters. They cannot keep the form because they are less pure, or the light is dim. So, and in here, Hekate is telling you, you can see that you're going to have a lot of entities coming down, accompanying the epiphany of the deity. And then finally, when you have the formless fire, now you need to listen. And that is a very clear path. So consider the oracles are really giving us a path we can follow if we can understand how they work. And it's just incredible to me that these oracles, they somehow survived. Even, mutilated. I still hope that sooner or later, I don't know, a scroll is coming up, discovered in Egypt with the full text. One can hope. You never know. And just to wrap up all this very long and complex presentation, what I really want to stress out is really that with the oracles and the idea of the theurgy, we can actually see how magic that is usually associated with the chthonic, very material art, so related to something very material we can achieve, thanks to Hekate, can be also a celestial art, because the idea is really to work on ourselves to achieve whatever salvation is up to you, because you can, aim for, the unity, the monad, the first principle you can achieve to meet Hekate, and that's going to be enough for you. You can go out for the cycle of the reincarnation. That is really about you and what you want to do. But following the oracles, you can actually figure out a way to achieve that. And that's basically all. It was quite a long run. I hope you are not just drained, and I hope it was clear. Now I'm trying to get out from the, voila, thank you, Joe. It was very helpful. And voila. So I think we can also stop the recording if someone wants to do some question. I don't know, Drew, if you prefer to keep it up or not.
Better if you leave, in my opinion, if you leave the recording for a few questions, because it might be common to everyone, or
Absolutely.
and then we can just end it after a few.
Perfect. So, any question?
I do have one. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Sarah. This is brilliant. This is amazing.
Oh, thank
I have
you.
been struggling a lot to grasp my mind around this concept, and you did it brilliantly. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would like to understand from your perspective as a practitioner, how do you work with this concept in your work or day to day, or how do you interact with this in your practice?
So basically, talking about the Chaldean oracles, I managed to bring some sort of information from the oracles, how to recreate a sort of ritual I'm working with, if that is the question. So basically, if you read carefully through the oracles, you can get a lot of hint of what the ancient theurgists were doing. So basically, really how the purification work, the invocation. I'm mixing it a bit with the PGM because sometimes people believe that the PGM are just, very material magic, but we can recognize in many of the spells we have in the PGM a theurgic base. And then in a very practical way, I use especially the strophalos to get in touch to invoke my daimon, that is my sort of, to use a normal term, more common probably, the guardian angel, let's say so, and then to contact and get in touch with Hekate. I don't know if this is answering your question. It's more
It
about,
is. It is.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like to get a sense of the materiality of the practice. Yeah. This is a
Yeah,
great example.
no, because all of these is very airy, it's very theoretical what we did today, because otherwise it's difficult to compress everything. Actually, the idea, the first time I did this class for a small group was everything together, but it was impossible. There were too many things to think about. But there is a way actually to translate all these theoretical things into a very practical stuff, something you can really use in your daily practice or for some special ritual.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Other question? Comment? Well, I think that's fine. Well, then again, if someone is interested, sorry, it's quite late here. It's not even that late, but I don't know, the hot is melting my brain probably. Anyway, if someone is interested, we can actually, do another class less theoretical, so more hands-on on the oracle. So what we can do in a very practical way, how we can use the strophalos, for example. That usually is something we all know what it is and how it works, physically speaking, but it's not maybe evident how to use it and when to use it in a ritual. Or if there is something that is really unclear because I failed to explain how this sort of strange cosmology or theology work, just let me know. Maybe you can just, also leave some, I think that this will be shared on the YouTube channel. I don't know if you have any question, even in the next days, you can just, write down a question and I'll try to answer.
Yeah, you guys, it's a very complex theme, right? Because it is if you're not versed in Neoplatonic philosophy, and so the concepts are very hard to grasp, even if you are actually. So, what the role of Hecate in the Chaldean oracles, as Sara Johnston puts it beautiful in the book, would be to weave the nous, or the intellect, the ideas, into physicalities. This is paraphrasing, but what she says is that she turns harmony, which would be the numbers, the idea, the music, the pure theory, into voice, into sound, into physicality, into material. So her role is basically as a mediator. So from the Chaldean oracles also we get the Angelus epithet that refers to the same thing. She is the messenger between the All-Father or perfect figure, as you want to call it, between it and the world, the sublunar world, turning into that idea, turning it into material world, and backwards. Because as Sara says, she is kind of in between. She's a little bit of both, right? So she is the one that transforms and carries those messages from one world to another in both directions. So that is a very easy or very super simple way of understanding it without the Neoplatonic, very heavy background, without the very heavy cosmology. So she is and always will be a mediator and a goddess of light.
Yeah, that is a perfect explanation in like 2 minutes, not even. It's just, yeah, it's the best way to understand it because, well, all the cosmology, all the theology that you need to know when you read the oracles, because otherwise you cannot understand them. It's just about that. It's really about how Hekate is the mediator. And since she's the one sending things down, she can send us back. And that is the angelus, the messenger role. And it's just the base. And I think this is also the greatness of the goddess, because, well, she's also everywhere, in every moment, in every place, and she's always doing this. So it's not just one single moment because you are performing the ritual that she can act like that. She's always there. It's maybe us that we are not able to interact with that aspect.
No, her role, her absolute essence in every single role that she has in every single myth is that of a guide and mediator, and that talks about why she's the goddess chosen for this specific system of belief and philosophy, because she's always the mediator between worlds. She's also always the liminal space, and she is even that in the Hellenic cult. So it would be a very appropriate goddess to take for this system, because she's not even, well, she would be outside kind of from the Olympians. So it's a very apt goddess for this. So yeah, that's basically how we understand it. She's always the mediator in every single one. Of that is the essence of Hekate as a goddess.